There's a certain type of person who steps into a nearly empty room, plain walls, minimal furniture, maybe a plant or two, and feels immediate relief. Their shoulders drop. Their breathing slows. It's as if the space itself gives them permission to rest. Meanwhile, someone else walks into that exact same room and feels uneasy, even a little hollow. The difference between these reactions isn't about style or trend. It reflects something deeper in personality and nervous system wiring. Minimalism, for some individuals, is less about aesthetics and more about identity. Psychologists have spent decades examining what humans truly require to feel psychologically stable, not just happy or outwardly successful, but fundamentally grounded. One of the most important needs they identified is autonomy, the sense that your life genuinely belongs to you. It's the feeling that your decisions, your habits, and even the space you inhabit reflect your values rather than social expectations. When autonomy is lacking, something subtle feels off. People who have a particularly strong need for self-direction are more likely to shape their lives intentionally, including the environments they occupy. For them, a sparse room doesn't signal deprivation. It signals ownership. The space feels aligned with who they are. It isn't controlling them. They are controlling it. While many people never consciously notice this distinction, those wired this way are acutely aware of it. This preference often overlaps with another trait, heightened sensitivity. At first glance, that may seem contradictory. We don't usually associate a nearly empty apartment with emotional depth. Yet research suggests otherwise. Some individuals process stimulation more intensely. For them, clutter isn't mildly distracting, it's draining. Work by Elaine Aron on highly sensitive individuals suggests that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that responds more strongly to sensory input. This sensitivity is largely inborn and remains stable over time. People high in sensory processing sensitivity report being more affected by noise, visual disorder, and environmental chaos. Unsurprisingly, they also tend to prefer quieter, simpler surroundings. In this context, minimalism isn't about taste. It's about regulation. A calmer space helps them function. Imagine your attention as a phone battery. Every visible object, a stack of mail, clothes on a chair, notifications on a screen, uses a bit of that battery simply by existing in your line of sight. You may not consciously focus on these things, but your brain is still processing them. A 2011 neuroscience study demonstrated that when multiple unrelated stimuli compete for attention, the brain divides its processing power. It cannot fully concentrate on everything at once. This split isn't a flaw in your discipline. It's how cognition works. For individuals who are naturally inclined toward deep thinking, those high in what psychologists call need for cognition, this fragmentation feels costly. They are more likely to manage their environments carefully because scattered attention directly interferes with their clarity. For them, an uncluttered space is not about appearance. It's about protecting the mental bandwidth required to complete a thought without interruption. Writers, artists, and other deep thinkers who gravitate towards simple rooms are often doing something practical rather than performative. They are safeguarding focus. When the environment is stripped down, there are fewer visual demands competing for cognitive resources. The result is a sense of mental spaciousness. There's also a quieter psychological layer beneath all of this. In 1988, consumer psychologist Russell Belk introduced the concept of the extended self. He argued that people incorporate their possessions into their identities. What we own subtly becomes part of how we define ourselves. Many individuals construct a sense of wholeness by accumulating objects that signal who they are or who they aspire to be. Minimalists often arrive, sometimes unconsciously, at a different conclusion. An identity built primarily on possessions feels unstable. Objects can be lost, damaged, or replaced. If your sense of self depends on them, it can feel fragile. Instead, minimalists tend to orient toward an internal identity that doesn't rely on inventory to feel complete. However, the same psychological wiring that makes minimalism feel natural can also create vulnerability. Under stress, the desire for control can intensify. Consider someone a few days after a breakup, not in dramatic despair, but in a quiet, functional state. They begin clearing out drawers. The ex-partner's belongings go first, then anything associated with shared memories, then perhaps unrelated items that suddenly feel excessive. From the outside, it may look like productivity or self-improvement. Internally, it may be an attempt to reduce emotional chaos by organizing physical space. Psychologists describe this as compensatory behavior, using tangible, controllable actions to manage abstract emotional pain. Each discarded object can provide a brief sense of agency. It's a small proof of control in a moment that feels destabilizing. But those small boosts fade. The threshold for what counts as too much can gradually shrink. What began as intentional simplicity can drift into compulsion. At that point, minimalism risks becoming avoidance disguised as peace. The room looks serene, but the motivation underneath may be distress. The person is no longer creating space for clarity. They are creating distance from grief or uncertainty. The same need for autonomy that once expressed itself as grounded intentionality can tip into rigidity when pressure builds. Importantly, the traits themselves do not change. Sensitivity, depth, and a desire for self-direction remain. What changes is the emotional load those traits are carrying. In stable periods of life, they may lead to admirable focus and authenticity. During upheaval, they can morph into excessive control. This tension can exist within the same person, even within the same month. Minimalism, then, is more nuanced than it appears. Those drawn to it often experience the world intensely. They are more aware of overstimulation and more invested in aligning their environment with their inner values. When life is calm, this produces clarity. When life is chaotic, it may produce relentless decluttering. The essential question rarely gets voiced. Is the simplicity an authentic expression of your wiring, or is it a strategy to avoid confronting something deeper? The answer is personal and often uncomfortable. Rather than looking to trends, algorithms, or curated boards for guidance, it may be more useful to observe your own body. Notice what happens physiologically when you step into a crowded room versus a nearly empty one. Do you feel tension or relief? Constriction or openness? These responses reveal more than aesthetics ever could. Minimalism can be a genuine alignment between nervous system and environment. It can also be a coping mechanism. Sometimes it is both at different times. The distinction requires honesty and pause, something many people avoid. Ultimately, the goal isn't to own less or more. It's to understand why you're drawn to what you're drawn to. If you slow down long enough to listen, your nervous system will tell you whether you're creating space to live more fully or using emptiness to escape something that still needs your attention.